Hey there, and welcome to this week's edition of the Life and Legacy Show, sponsored by the Seckler Law Firm, where great families make great estate plans. My name is Tim Seckler. I am a certified elder law attorney and an estate planner, and I own a little law firm in Cranberry Township that focuses on estate planning predominantly for middle class folks. And we do this radio show. If you're new to the radio show, maybe you just found it. We do it every week. And our idea doing this show is to get you the information you need in order to make great estate planning decisions. So on the show, I take it as an opportunity to do the education piece. At our firm, we like to do the education piece for free. So why not give you a head start by doing the education piece right here? And so on the show, we talk about things like wills and trusts and powers of attorney and long-term care expenses and getting you the things you need to know in order to make a really good estate plan. If you are a weekly listener, my apologies for last week. If you can tell, I am getting over this virus that's going around. And last week you would not have wanted to listen to me talk for half an hour, and so last week you got a rerun. My apologies. This week we're back at it. And there's a thing I want to talk about before I get into this. My disclaimer is that this is for your education. This is for your entertainment. This is not legal advice. Don't make any decisions based on what you hear on this or any other radio show. We're not doing this to give you advice. We're doing this to give you information. If you need advice, you need to give us a call, which you can do anytime. Give us a call, 724-841-1393, or check us out online. I've got lots of materials on our YouTube channel. I got lots of materials on our website. You can listen to over 150 old episodes of this show on podcast on iTunes or Spotify. So if you're into that, you can find it. SecklerLawFirm.com is a great place. Now, I want to talk to you about an article that came out last week. Rather December 29th. And it is on NBC News. And the headline is this. The headline says, "The wealth transfer from boomers won't save Generation X and the millennials." It will not save Generation X and the millennials. So I see a headline like that, and I dig in a little bit. And here's the whole idea. The whole idea is that there is the baby boomer generation, which is by most people's accounting, the wealthiest single generation in world history. I mean, the American baby boomer lived in the time of great prosperity in this country, had their careers in the 70s, 80s, and 90s when the money was being made. The baby boomers are well positioned as compared to previous generations, and they are well positioned as compared to the generations behind them from a financial standpoint. And there's this idea that says that the baby boomers will be passing away during the next 20 to 30 years. And as the baby boomers pass away in the next 20 to 30 years, their wealth is going to help the next generation, not have to work so hard and all the rest. Because there's this very palpable, very factually true situation where Generation X and the millennials don't feel as financially secure as their parents. They've got greater debt. They've got lower home ownership. They've got fewer. The rate that the jobs are paying are not keeping up with the prices that are rising, right? And so there's this idea amongst the Generation X and the millennials that they're not going to be able to save what their parents saved. And I can tell you that, the families in those generations that we see in the estate plan, I think that that's true. It's not everybody. You can't cast this net too broadly, but generationally speaking, the baby boomers have more money. So here's the idea. Is the baby boomer wealth transfer that's going to occur over the next several decades, is that going to save the next generation and, in effect, in some respects, save the country from going downhill economically, politically, et cetera? And this article, the author of this article says, no, not so fast. And here's essentially what he says, and it's kind of what we've been screaming around here for a long time, is that, okay, yes, it's a wealthy generation, but there's an estimate that they quote in the study. $53 trillion will be passed down from baby boomers to Generation X and the millennials. Okay, so that sounds like a big number, but almost 70% of it 70% of the wealth that will be transferred between the year 2020 and 2045, which includes the boomers, will come from U.S. households with at least $1 million in investable assets. So 70% of it, 68% of it is coming from people who have $1 million in investable assets. Investable assets probably does not include home equity. All right. So 70% of it is going to come from millionaires. But here's the challenge. 6.9% of the households actually hit that threshold. So it's only 7% of the households. So 70% of the money that's being transferred to the next generation is only coming from 7% of the households. Well, then that means the other 93% of the households are splitting up 30% of the wealth. And that's where a lot of the kids live, right? So for a lot of situations, you take your middle class families, and there's a lot of millionaires who would consider themselves middle class these days. Um, but you've got people in the middle class where the wealth transfer is not as big. So we can look at the baby boomer population, and we can say, well, yeah, there's all this money, but most of it, the rich keep getting richer, the poor keep getting poorer and whatnot. Most of it is with wealthy families. Most of us don't come from wealthy families. 93% of the people don't come from the families where these dollars are. And then so 93% are splitting up the rest. And here's the other challenge. And I give the reporter, the author of um, this article, a ton of credit, because this is what we've been screaming a long time. Is this isn't easy stuff. And the problem with the middle class, you take a look at this situation, and you've got the boomers, and there's a whole bunch of people with several $100,000 saved, up to $1.5 million. There's a whole bunch of baby boomers in that sort of demographic, and there's a lot of them in Pittsburgh. Um, but the article points out, well, okay, but what happens if they get sick? Because the problem here is the next generation is not going to inherit the money. Most of these people, here's what it says. Fidelity's annual retiree healthcare estimate, a single 65-year-old will need to spend about $157,500 to cover their healthcare expenses in retirement. And a married couple could be as much as $315,000. So that's on average. That's your average healthcare expense. Okay, well, that's on average, which means some people are paying more than that. And so you start taking a look at this thing, and you listen to what the Alzheimer's Association is telling us, and what they're telling us is that 1 in 3 seniors are going to have dementia. All right, so here's Fidelity, biggest financial institution around, telling us that your average cost for a married couple could be $315,000. Okay, you've got the Alzheimer's Association telling us that 1 in 3 seniors are going to have dementia, right? And the government doesn't pay for nursing homes. You pay for nursing homes privately. Nursing homes in Pennsylvania are between $150,000 and $180,000 a year right now. That's today's dollars, right? And you take somebody that has saved several $100,000, and we got to ask an honest question. Okay, Mr. Middle Class, you've saved several $100,000. Fantastic. How are your kids doing? Well, Johnny didn't move out of the house until he was 41, and he's not working. These kids these days, they don't have what we used to have, and he's got all this student loan debt because he wanted to spend 8 years in college studying, art appreciation, and he doesn't have any money. And I don't know, he's driving my old car, and I don't know how this thing is going to work. Okay, Mr. Middle Class. Well, what are your savings? Well, I've got, $500,000, and at least I can leave that to Johnny and his 2 siblings. Well, but what about the $315,000 on average in healthcare costs? Oh, well, isn't Medicare going to pay for that? Nope, Mr. Middle Class. Medicare doesn't pay for nursing home expenses. This is sort of the biggest lie going, because what they tell you as you're paying into the system for 50 years is that when you turn 65, you're going to have health care coverage. Except when you turn 65, you find out that Medicare does not pay for long-term care expenses. Medicare pays for acute care, not long-term care. Medicare doesn't pay for nursing homes. Oh, you mean I'm gonna have to pay for that privately? Yep. You pay for that privately until you go broke, at which point in time Medicaid will pay the nursing home. Oh. Well, that leaves my kids in a pretty tough spot because they're not making enough money. How are my kids ever going to retire? Don't know, Mr. Middle Class. But them's the shakes. And that's the way that this thing is going to go. And we all thought that the wealthy baby boomer population transfer of wealth is going to save this next generation. Who knows about the generation after that? But that's not going to happen because the middle class families are going to get smoked by long-term care. And this is a message, this article, which you can find on NBC News, December 29th, 2023, they nail it. This has been our message here for a long time, because and you've got this situation where um, you know we kind of have to figure this thing out. And attorneys like me, we call ourselves elder law attorneys. I hate the word elder law because most of my clients do not consider themselves old. They may be retired, but that's not the same thing as being old, right? 20-year-olds don't understand that. But you can be retired and not consider yourself old. And so I'm not old. Why would I go see an elder law attorney? I'm not old. We should probably better classify this thing as like retirement law, perhaps. But in any event, what we like to do is we like to teach people about this sort of broken government system that requires people to go broke if you end up getting sick. And what ends up happening is we do asset protection work. My clients end up doing a lot of trust work to protect assets from this long-term care system because if you have worked hard to save a house, if you have worked hard to save a $500,000, couple $100,000, $700,000, $1 million, I don't really care. If you've worked hard to save some stuff, I presume you would prefer that that stuff get to your family members or your favorite nonprofit or whomever you want it to go, rather than some long-term care expense, rather than the government, rather than some broken system. And maybe we can actually transfer some wealth to the next generation. That's been our message for years. Is, hey, look, this system isn't broken. Estate planning is not just death planning. Estate planning is really asset protection planning. And so this article, I think, does a really good job of bringing attention to this point, because when I'm meeting with clients, when I'm chatting with clients, and we're talking about their net worth, and they're talking about leaving an inheritance to other people and stuff, there's always this caveat that I have in my head, like, yeah, but what if that doesn't work out? What if it doesn't get to your kids? What if what if you end up getting sick? And those are things that we've got to work through. I like to talk about this. I've been talking about this stuff, for years, and I'm starting to get more and more of these sort of speaking invitations to come and chat with groups and with other lawyers, and it's been fun and it's been interesting, and it's cool that people like to hear what I have to say. So I had this invitation last week to go down to Alabama, to Birmingham, Alabama, and speak to this group of estate planning attorneys. And I go and I get down there, and there's this group of 60 or 70 attorneys in the room, and they're all in the estate planning business. And I did a little poll and I did a show of hands, and I said, who in here is an estate planner? They all raised their hand. Okay, great. Who in here considers themselves an elder law attorney? And out of the 60 or 70 estate planning attorneys, one guy raises his hand, one person. I kind of pointed out and I said, you and I are sort of kindred spirits here because you're fighting the good fight. And not that the other people aren't fighting a good fight, but here's the problem. In the estate planning industry, there, one, aren't enough good attorneys. And what do I mean by that? Well, not every attorney that writes a will would consider themselves an estate planning attorney, right? The people that are all in estate planning attorneys, most of those law firms end up doing planning for higher net worth families, all right? Business owners, people with $10 million and up, $5 million and up, whatever the number is, but they're dealing with higher net worth families. Those families' concerns are typically around wealth transfer and taxation, because we have death taxes in Pennsylvania. There are death taxes at the federal level. And so a lot of the estate planning law is really about taxes. Now, middle class families don't really have tax problems in the same way that wealthier people do. You know, a middle class person that doesn't have $10 million isn't going to lose $1 million to death taxes. Um, and so a lot of the extremely well qualified, well experienced estate planning attorneys, they are in the federal estate tax planning business, and they tend to work in the ivory tower law firms, and they tend to not really know a ton about this long-term care system, this Medicaid system, this Medicare system, because their clientele is not worried about it, right? So then what's the other? And it's kind of, it reminds me of a story, and I find the story kind of funny. Is when I was in law school, you know, in law school, the first year they kind of lay out for you the classes that you need to take. But then as you get into second and third year, you take some electives. And one of the electives I took was an estate planning elective, and I don't remember what the course was called, but we go to this class on the very first day, and I'm interested at the time in estate planning. I really hadn't made career decisions at that point in time, and it might have been a federal estate tax class, but it was predominantly on estate planning for high net worth families. That was sort of the idea. And I sit down, and at the lower level, I found this estate planning thing to be kind of interesting. And I sit down, and I remember I sat down with a friend. The guy's name's Mike Watson. And Mike was a former Army guy. I was a former Air Force guy. We were pals in law school, and we sit down, and the professor was kind of surprised about how many people had chosen this elective. There was a big class, and the professor said, "Why are you guys all here?" And a couple of people said, "Well, we found the first level class to be interesting, whatever." And she said, "Look, if you are not committed to spending your career saving wealthy people money on taxes, then you probably should not be in this room." And Mike and I look at each other, and we stood up and we walked out. We were the only two guys that walked out. That's not what I'm going to commit my career to. I think it could be interesting work, and we do plenty of that work, and I find it interesting, but it's not really my mission, and so we both kind of chuckled to ourselves and went and enrolled in some other class. And I find it funny now that, after having walked out of the advanced estate planning class, that I own one of the larger estate planning practices in the city of Pittsburgh. But what I like to talk about and what I like to deal with is not federal estate tax planning for wealthy people. That's not really, we do that. Amy Reese, who's my managing attorney, has a tax LLM. She's got a ton of experience in that space. It's just not what I do all day long. What I like to talk about all day long is really good planning for middle class families. Because what does that look like? Well, that looks a little different. It's not tax law. It's complicated, but it's not tax law. It's just not the same thing. And what that often looks like is wealth transfer and asset protection from long-term care expenses, and saving some headache and making the thing easier for your kids and all the rest. Um, and so I kind of find this whole thing funny. So here I am, and I'm speaking to this group of federal estate tax planners in Alabama last week, and none of them know anything about Medicare and Medicaid, right? Which begs the question. Well, all right, but where are the good people of Birmingham, Alabama, getting their estate planning done? And here's the answer. I think that most middle class families, if you reach out to that sort of federal estate tax planning attorney that doesn't know anything about long-term care planning, the answer you're likely going to get is, "Look, sir, ma'am, you are not wealthy, um, and therefore you do not need federal estate tax planning, and then therefore here is your will-based estate plan. Um, be on your way." But that assumes that the only two issues were who gets the stuff and taxes. But there's this entire other issue about what happens if I get really, really sick before I pass away. But those attorneys just don't know much about it. All right, the other option that people have is they could go to a general practice lawyer, right? So there's a law firm on every corner, and you call up the general practice law firm, and you go to an attorney who does divorces on Tuesdays and traffic ticket on Wednesdays, and criminal court on Thursdays, and on Fridays they write will, and one day a week they golf, and they don't really understand long-term care expenses. They've never really gotten involved in trusts, and so when all you have is a hammer, everything kind of looks like a nail. And so everybody ends up with a will. And so you got this thing that has grown over time. You got the high-end tax planners, and all they're doing is writing wills because they don't know the long-term care stuff. You got the general practitioners out there, and all they're doing is writing wills because they don't know anything. And so this entire generation, the baby boomer generation, the middle class baby boomers, all they've heard from anybody and everybody is all you need is a will, because that's all the people know. And then you got this breed of attorneys out there calling themselves elder law attorneys. And in an elder law practice, um, you do cases where families have ended up in a nursing home. Somebody's sick, somebody's in a nursing home, they're going through 150 or $180,000. And in order to fix that problem, I got to get pretty good at this whole area of law called Medicaid. And once you get really good at the practice of law called Medicaid, now there's things we can do even after somebody's in a nursing home to help protect their assets, right? And so we in our law firm, we probably do 6 to 10 of these cases a month where a family reaches out to our law firm, somebody's in a nursing home, and we're trying to solve this problem of somebody essentially going broke. What can we do to save the house? What can we do to save some money for the healthy spouse? Dad's in the nursing home, mom's at home. Is there anything we can do? And when you get into this elder law practice, you end up doing a lot of estate planning. But because we do these nursing home cases, we've got an eye toward not just who gets the stuff when I pass. We also have an eye toward how do we protect this family so that they don't end up like my other type of clients who are going broke in nursing homes. And when you start looking at it that way and you start to learn this stuff, trusts make a lot of sense for middle class families. And this is the type of thing that we like to teach people in our workshops. So if you're curious about how to do really good planning for your family, actually protecting assets from these risks, actually getting an inheritance to your children and helping them, you should come to one of our upcoming 3 Secrets to Protect Your Legacy workshops. You can find them on our website. Go to secklerlawfirm.com, SECHLER lawfirm.com. Go to the workshops tab. And when you're on the workshops tab, you can find all of our upcoming workshops. They're free. And here's what we do in the workshop. You're going to learn all about wills. You're going to learn about trusts. You're going to learn about taxes. We're going to talk about revocable trusts and who should consider revocable living trusts. We're also going to talk to you about irrevocable trusts and why you might think that they're a good idea. We're going to talk to you about probate avoidance. We're going to talk to you about all the things that you should know in order to protect yourself from these risks that retirees face. The workshop is free. It's helpful. And then what we do is we invite you to a series of other classes where we actually help you get these estate plans done, these documents done at a great rate. Once the estate plan is done, then we're not done, right? In law school, they call estate planning transactional law, meaning basically when you've written, a client goes to an attorney, attorney prepares documents, client purchases documents, client signs documents. That's the end of the transaction. I have documents. I essentially went to a document store. And that's not the way that I think this thing should be done. So we have this entire program that we call our Red Wagon Club that exists after you've signed your estate planning documents. We want to talk to you about planning for your digital assets, your videos, your phone, the pictures on your phone. We want to leave some stories for your grandkids and great grandkids. We want to help preserve your story for the next generation because they're as interested in your story as they are in your money. And so let's take some steps to preserve that. Then we have a class that we teach your kids how to be an executor and what a trust is and how to be a trustee. We call it the Know Your Role workshop. So we teach your kids because one of the things that I hear from my clients is, I didn't know this was going to be so difficult and I don't want to put this burden on my kids. And we don't want to create a situation where the kids don't understand what's going on. So we start to form a relationship with our clients' kids ahead of time because if dad gets sick or when mom passes away, now you know who you're reaching out to. You know what the system is going to look like. You know how it's going to go. And so we start working on that. We also teach our clients an awful lot about long-term care. Here's the difference between a personal care home and assisted living. Oh, you want to stay in your home as long as possible. Got it. Here's how we might engineer your affairs so that could happen. And so, what this is all about is estate planning. The way I view the world is not just about who gets my stuff when I pass away. There's this thing that occurs when people write an estate plan. and they've done it the right way. And it's kind of like, you know what? I'm not going to just let this all happen to me. I'm going to take control of my retirement. I'm going to take control of the last third of my life. And I'm going to see what's out there and I'm going to see it coming. And I'm nobody's sucker. And if the government rule book is broken, then I'm going to write my own rule book. And that to me is the thing that really makes great estate planning. If that rings a bell with you, check us out at secklerlawfirm.com, Secler lawfirm.com. We'd love to meet you. We'd love to educate you and help you with this whole thing. If you found this episode interesting, that's great. Remember, don't make any legal decisions based on what you hear on this or any other radio show. This is for your education and information. But I hope you found it helpful, and we will see you here next week.